Okay, so we're going to go into the project file first. I'm just going to talk us through this, and you can ask questions.
Ending my project, yes?
It just depends on where you store, wherever the main project is stored. If we're starting from scratch, like if I'm making a trailer, I keep these in here so that we don't have to rebuild it every time. And basically, this is the structure. You like copy this, put it in here, and rename it to like I just did with this one here. And it has the project in it, which you can also rename. It has folders. Assets is where I would put the stuff. So it has the assets folder in there. You can put your video clips. The general base has just some default filler clips and stuff. Sometimes I'll delete those depending on, because usually I don't actually end up using them. And then there's folders for stills, etc. And then the stills have commonly used things like the Sime Effects logo, Expose logo, that kind of Sime Studios logo.
You generally keep everything in the pendant folder that you're working on video ones.
Yes, but the folder it's in isn't relevant to
I know
what
it's not
you
relevant
do.
how to do
But
it.
most pending products are pretty much always in here. That's generally where we're keeping this kind of stuff. Okay, so what you want to do, so we're going to work on the Power Workflow 4 promo. You'd open the project, and it opens really fast because it's already opened. And then what you do, so by default, the main clips will be empty. I just loaded these in here. So I just exported these. I just went to Lightroom and went to all the videos I was going to use for this. Just exported the original videos from Lightroom. So I went to the promos. I'd already sorted them and picked out what I needed.
Do you have to render them out of Lightroom before you can do that?
No, in this case, we're not editing them in Lightroom. I'm just organizing them in Lightroom. I just went to export and went to this full raw still video, which basically just means and it's just exporting the video with the original unedited file. So really all I did was tell it what videos to export, where to put them, and it just made a copy of the source files. I mean, you could just as easily, you could manually open them and copy and paste them, but this is quicker. So then I put those in assets then, clips, and then I just drag those to put something into the timeline. The quickest way for me is you just select whatever you want and you just drag it in. You can actually put it in the individual folder, or you can just drag it into here, but if you got a lot of them, it's best to keep them organized. So I already did that, so we don't need to do that. Let's just minimize that. So in here, we have main clips, which is all the primaries, texts already kind of filled, and it's just kind of general black and white info boxes, headlines, that kind of stuff that you can modify accordingly. What's already in here is just some basic stuff. There's some basic music in here already, but not necessarily what we use. The logos are already in here. The kind of stuff that you would generally use, and then you have a master sequence, which is of course what's selected. So in Premiere, here's the interface of Premiere. Up here you have the project, which in this case is PW4 Promo, and in that is your folders that have all your source material. They're not stored in the project. That's what we see in this folder.
In the project.
I mean, it's not part of, this is the project. It's this little 700 kilobyte file. These files here are just reference files, which is why in this case, kind of like we do with Lightroom catalogs, I store all the...
In other words, in your project is just links.
Projects are linked to source files, which in the way we work, the way our workflow is set up, we always put our source files in the folder with the chapter, like we did with Exposed. Each
but the source files are still in the project's folder. Okay.
They're in the folder that the project is in. It's not the but it has nothing. The project, they're just all in the same folder, so it's easy to manage them.
Okay.
Because if you drag things in, like if I go to iTunes, let's say, and I find a piece of music I want to use, I drag it out to the desktop, let's say, but I don't want to put it into here from the desktop. I first want to put it into the audio folder in here and then drag it in so that it's referenced from the folder it belongs in, so that I don't have a bunch of stuff scattered all over the place.
Okay, I think that makes sense, yeah.
All right, so the interface in Premiere is the project is an overview of all the different content that's in there, including sequences. So all these folders and files, you can make new stuff down here, new bins, which is the same as a folder, or a new item sequence is going to be the most common one you're going to use, but there's different stuff you can do in there. So a sequence then is this timeline down here. If I click on this sequence, whatever I drag down here, so let's just take a clip and drag it into the timeline. Okay, so now this clip is in the timeline.
Is that double arch?
No, it's cross of an arch. Okay, so this clip is in the timeline, like so. Now, if I were to make a new sequence, so I could drag whatever I want in here, mix things up. I mean, this is the normal way that we build a project, like a chapter in a film. But within a project, what you need to understand is you can have, a lot of times we do a project with one sequence to keep it organized. Like this is the trailer for this, and it just has a project in it. But you can make another project. So you can make a project. I click the new project button, and
is somehow connected?
Just a second.
Okay.
I'm making a new, not a new project, same project. So I make a new sequence.
With sequence, okay, that makes more sense.
And then you set how you want the sequence to be set up, what the parameters are, which is normally the same for us: 1080p, DSLR, 1080p, 24p. So you want to be like that's pretty much how all our timelines, our sequences are built.
Is the C100 still DSLR?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's that kind of footage. The other stuff is talking about like it's imported from tape or DV tapes or something like that. So it's still the same. So I'd make a sequence, and here's this new sequence, and it's empty. So like you could actually take something like Exposed, and the whole movie would be one project, and it would just be chapter 1 sequence, chapter 2 sequence, and that might be a more, I mean, it would get really huge, but that might be a more efficient way to do things because all your clips, everything would be in one. So the key to do that would be to have lots of bins or folders so that all your different clips and stuff were nicely organized and you could get to stuff.
The whole sequence is just an organizational for putting.
Well, the sequence is what you actually export. So if you go in, when you finish everything, and you go to export videos, you say export sequence 1, export sequence 2, and that's what the sequence is what actually turns into an individual video file. So
in other words, when you're done, you want to make your individual video one sequence, whether you had it more than one before or not.
No, I mean your individual video, like a chapter, is a sequence. So pretty much
because the chapters and exposed are separate files.
Almost every project we do is a sequence. So the question is, depending on what project you're working on, do you want to make a new project for each sequence, i.e. video clip that you're going to make, or do you want to have one project that has a whole bunch of sequences? So in the case of a trailer for Power Workflow 4, it would be kind of impractical to have a project where it's also bundled with the trailer for Exposed, because it would just be clutter. That stuff's not related. It's like
like in the case of photographics, on the other hand.
Then we might do larger. I haven't decided yet what the best workflow, but probably that's the most organized way to do it. So we can get rid of this sequence. So if you delete a sequence, it's not deleting any files, but it will delete any work you've done in the sequence. I mean, when push comes to shove, most of the work goes into your sequence. That's where all the fades, where all the color corrections, all the effects are. So let's say, okay, let's start building it then. Here is, let's look at the length of this. Duration, 314. Okay, here's our pop-up wheat scenes from Power Workflow 4. So what we do is just start playing back. So this is raw footage playing in the source. So you double-click something in the project.
How is it playing raw footage? I thought it couldn't handle that.
Oh, it can handle that. There's no effects applied to it. It's not a problem. It's also not playing it back at full resolution, probably. Okay, so anything you click here, though, whether it be a piece of music or a photo or whatever, it's going to show up in this source. This is showing. This is the raw material. This is essentially the browser, and this is the playback of whatever you double-click in the browser. So we have the pop-up wheat. And we play it back.
Power Workflow 2. Hold on. We don't need to reset. I'll just redo it.
I remember that.
It doesn't really matter what you photograph. Power Workflow 4 is the Lightroom preset collection for everything.
Okay, so let's say we wanted to use that. We go back to, you can scrub through. See, it's really easy to work in here to decide how you want to use a clip because there's no effect, it's not slow, it's not laggy, and you can be really precise about where you drag the play in. Okay, so let's go back to here and set an in point. Okay, now we'll play.
It doesn't really matter what you photograph. Power Workflow 4 is the Lightroom preset collection for everything.
So is the in point when you insert in a sequence, that's where it'll start?
Hang on.
For everything.
Okay, so now it's set up. So you right-click on this little blue hit thing, which is the position of the playhead right now, which you can also drag and scrub through. Okay, so set clip marker out point. So see, now we've just got this little area highlighted. If I grab this now and drag it into the timeline, I'm not dragging that whole 7-minute clip. I'm just dragging the little segment that we got into the timeline. Okay, so this is where I would start applying effects and organizing it and mixed it with music. But let's continue. So we might go again. Let's keep playing.
Wait, this says wouldn't you assemble the whole thing before you did that?
Before I did what?
Effects and music?
Yeah, but this is where it's going to happen.
Oh, okay. I meant like right now it is.
Let's just let these ones run along if they're related to the same thing.
So basically what we got to do on something like this is you got to go through the footage, especially when it's a promo or something where we're kind of repeating ourselves. I mean, if it's a long dialogue, you got to make sure, decide what part, where you want to start and end. With these things, we've recorded half a dozen different clips inside of it.
How's that? Good idea. You know what I hate as much as you?
Okay, so let's say, probably won't use this, but if we did another one, it mixes that old in and out point. That goes. There's only one in and out point on a clip at any given time. Okay.
So in other words, you can put a clip in and then insert in and out, and it'll work.
Yeah. So then I can drag a clip in. So
wait a second. Okay. So that clip is dragged in.
It's now the other clip of that clip. Changing the in and out points on this has nothing to do with once in the timeline. Once it's in the timeline, it's in the timeline.
Until you move something.
The only way something's going to change in the timeline is if the source video changes, or in the case of, we've talked before about when you have when we've edited audio and stuff, and then you reference into that new audio piece. If you then re-edit that audio, it changes the audio in the timeline because it's just referencing the content from here.
Okay. So when you move the in and out points, it does not affect what's in the timeline until you add it to that piece to the timeline. So in other words,
it doesn't do anything with the timeline. All the in and out points do is set it up so
when you set
an in and out point, and now when you drag it to the timeline, it only, instead of dragging the whole clip, it only drags in. So if you wanted to drag the whole clip, to do that, you'd actually need to do like we do when we're going to edit the audio. You'd go to clear clip marker, in and out, and you'd erase both clip markers. Now if I drag the clip in, it's going to put the whole thing in there, which is how we do it if we're editing audio. If we need to add the audio in an external editor, that's how we do it, because we can go clear in and out points, then we can go to edit the audio.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And extract the audio into Sound Booth, do edits to it, save it back in, and then we can do that feature where we go in and shift option and drag the new audio to overwrite the audio on the clip with the new audio.
What's your photograph?
Oops, hang on. Like so. I don't know why I got so many selected here all of a sudden. There. See, now I've replaced that audio with music, which is totally pointless, but if that was edited audio, that's how you would do it. Okay, so let's continue with the general interface, though. So we've got some clips in the timeline, and let's find some other stuff. Gavin, walk in. What's this? Does this have to do with PW4? That's just a general purpose, I think.
So let's dig in and let's take a look at Power Workflow. Let me show you what Power Workflow can do for our images, for our creativity, for our efficiency, to help us become better photographers.
Okay, so let's say we want to use this. We've got to find the beginning.
So let's dig.
But you not only want to find the beginning, you want to start your in and out point in such a way that you're the starting position. That's why a lot of times we do pauses and stuff in between segments, so you can find like this nice starting position where my arms aren't flying around. So you go in point.
So let's dig in and let's take a look at Power Workflow. Let me show you what Power Workflow can do for our images, for our creativity, for our efficiency, to help us become better photographers. Let's head over here and hop into Lightroom and take a closer look at what Power Workflow can do for us.
Okay, so that's close enough for now. Out point, and we drag it in. Now, usually when I'm going in, see, the default project, normally when you make a new project, it only has a couple tracks, but we always use a lot of tracks, so I just leave a lot in there. If you're working on this display, it's pretty easy because we can see so many at the same time. On a small screen, it's kind of a pain because you're always going up and down. But what I'll usually do is alternate. I'll kind of get a main, usually I'll kind of work out from the center, or maybe start on, what I've started doing a little bit is starting on track 2, and then leaving track 1 open, so if later I want to add a bass soundtrack or extra audio or something, it's handy and available, but that's not that critical. The point is I'll usually go back and forth to start with between 2 tracks so that I can easily overlap things and stuff to do fades if need be. Now, we can still, so we're dragging this stuff into the timeline at this point. Here is all our content. Here's the source.
Yep.
And over here, in this window, is the playback of whatever's in the timeline, however it's been edited, whatever effects, whatever that's...
So that's timeline playing live.
What you see over here is what's going to export, with the exception of the fact that if you right-click here, we've defined settings in terms of playback resolution, which is set to 1/4 so it doesn't run so slow, pause resolution, etc. So it's not the full quality, but that's representative of the project.
Full idea of the full quality.
Yes. Now, this yellow line, this can be red, yellow, or green. If it's green, it means it's rendered. If I were to press enter right now, whoops. If I were to render this, I don't know why it's not doing it. Maybe I guess because nothing needs to be rendered. Okay, let's say I put an effect on this. If I hit enter, it's going to render the red areas. So if they're green, that means they can play back. Meaning even if you put a bunch of effects on something, you could then play it back in real time because it essentially did a low quality render of the whole thing. But if you're on a whole project, it's not like you do that every 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll do that before I finish, but it can take like 30 minutes to render because it's essentially having to render the footage. It's just doing it at a fairly low quality. If it's yellow, it's just basically, that's what it is when it's raw footage, and it'll just play back. If it's green, it's rendered. And if it's red, it'll still play. It's just depending on how many effects and stuff on it, it might start hanging up. But what it basically does is plays it back. That's why I usually leave it at 1/4 resolution when I'm working on the general assembly, because you don't want to be rendering it at that point. It would take too long.
Does it have a ridiculous save time and tendency to crash that SoundBooth does?
No, it saves just in a couple seconds, because all you're saving, you're not saving out all those source files like SoundBooth does. You're saving that teeny tiny project file that's just referencing all the other files. But you do want to make sure you save things because it does crash occasionally. Okay, so now you're in this timeline, and we're starting to build these different pieces. At this point, usually what I'm doing, I'm fine to do with something like this. If we were building a chapter of like a photographics or something like that, we kind of know what that chapter is. We gather all the material, cut out the bad stuff, put it together, and then say, okay, does anything need to go? With a trailer, it's a ton of little bitty stuff. So with the trailer, with the promo videos, what we need to do is generally I go through all the main content, pick out anything that's good, set in and out points, drag it into the timeline, just kind of back and forth pretty loosely, and start moving around in rough order, and you can zoom out down here, so you can get closer in or further.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll just start building all this stuff out, and there'll be way more than you actually need. But rather than just drag full clips in, you actually take segments. Like I might use this segment, I might use this segment, I might use this segment. It's probably going to go back here. So you just start building them out to get a general layout. And at that point, we don't need to worry about audio or effects or anything like that. We don't do that till you've actually built and said, okay, I think this is everything we want to use. And then you've laid over filler pieces. And it's like, you don't have to have done like the complete final edit, but you have the general layout done. Then you can go to work on saying, okay, I'm going to use these, and you can edit the audio tracks. But we'll come to that in a minute. So we're dragging stuff in. What else do we got? Here's something here.
I'm really excited about this new generation of presets. Lightroom is a powerhouse, and we just made it easier for photographers to leverage that power. I'm Kevin Stein, and this is Power Workflow 4.
Okay, so there was really two clips there. So we could say in,
and this is Power Workflow 4. Got power.
Pause, out. So normally I wouldn't be bouncing back and forth. I would be doing this one clip. I would go down the list and be doing this one clip at a time. And I would listen to the whole clip and just do in and out points. And if there's stuff that's totally, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily drag in 5 versions of the same thing. I would go through and listen and say, okay, this sounds good. That's the one I drag in. But in this case, we got, let's do this. Okay, let's set it in point again because
I'm Kevin Stein, and this is Power Workflow 4.
Okay, there's a clip right there. Set clip marker, out point, and drag it in. Now we may totally not use this. The point is we're going through and getting all the stuff that's relevant, because then we can look at it in the timeline and decide what's going to be useful, and to make the goal of getting everything down to like 3 minutes.
That selection. 4.
So if you click down here and click space, it's playing this.
Yes.
If you click up here, it's kind of like Windows frames. Now, like Windows within the frame. Okay. So let's say we'd done all this, and maybe we took a piece like this, or
like that, which is actually used too much,
Yeah, we may not use this, but let's just say we wanted a filler piece of like a walk-in scene. We might go like this.
Holy crap, who likes that tree, doesn't he?
It's a cool tree.
It is a cool tree.
Okay, so we might go like this. Now, and I might just put, if it's another thing I'll do if it's filler clips is maybe just put them up on a separate track or something so you can kind of differentiate like the main clips down these back and forth on these two tracks and then fillers up here. Another thing I'll do is I start to build, once I actually start putting it together, then you have to start moving things around, lining things up and all that. So what I'll do is zoom way out sometimes and put things that I'm not using way out here. Because once you delete them, you would have to go back and listen to all these tracks. It doesn't save these. I mean,
it's just like when you're writing and you don't want to throw something away, so you don't drop it down 5 paragraphs.
Yeah, because if you delete this,
you don't have.
Then you got to go back and find it again. Unless if you did a whole layout and you had a bunch of random things, but then you wanted to start deleting things, what you could do actually is take a sequence and copy the sequence and paste the sequence and just make a copy of that sequence that had this, and you could call it like basic sort or something like that, which could be a good workflow thing because then you could always like here's all the clips I might use. Then you could go and continue editing the sequence faster and delete those clips because you could always go back. You could
it's just a backup. That's all it is. It's just a backup.
And between sequences, you could copy and paste. You can select an individual element in the sequence. Command C, go to another sequence.
And Command V.
And Command V, and it'll paste it in. Now, where it's pasting in, as you start getting a busy timeline, you got to watch out because note what track is highlighted. So in this case, 2 is highlighted, so it's pasting it in 2. If I unclicked it and selected 5, it would paste into 5. So once you start getting a busy timeline, it can get messy. Usually if I'm pasting something in when I got a busy timeline, I'll move the playhead way out here so it's just an open field. Because all this stuff, of course, has to go on the final because we don't want to export it. It's just all we're doing is trying to keep it organized. Okay, so just going to keep that out of the way for now. All right, so let's say we are in here. Now we're in the timeline. So we have the content, the source, the preview, and the timeline. We're in the timeline, playback.
It doesn't really matter what you photograph. Power Workflow 4 is the Lightroom preset collection for everything. So let's dig in.
Now, let's go move this here. Let's put this right here. Now zoom in, down here. And what I want to do is overlap these a little bit. So you can just go like this, but one of the most precise ways to do this is to set your playhead. So let's say I want to go here. Whoops, let me just, now see what I just did there? Let me undo that. Well, look at this. These don't match up. I just cut off some of the audio because I dragged this over the top of that. You got to watch that. That's why it's really important when you alternate things. So let's undo all that, bring this back again. But
it'll cut off the audio if you drag over it. It won't double up.
No, it won't double up. It'll cut it off. Each track in the timeline is static. Anything that's there overrides anything. So that's why we alternate like this. When you first drag it in, it will drag it in. You know, if I drag this in, it'll put it.
I get it.
Like so. It'll move it around. So it'll put, you know, if I put it in video 2, it's going to put the audio in
audio.
So
overlap, but you have to have it in different tracks.
It always has to, yeah, that's why we do different tracks. But you got to be careful when you're moving things around because as you start shifting things, remember, if I move this, once it's in there, when you first drag it in, it puts the audio in the same audio track number as the video track number. Once you're in the once it's already in the timeline, if you move the video, it doesn't move the audio, which in a way is a good thing because you'd end up overriding other stuff. So if I want to move it, you got to make sure, if I want to move this to 1 and then move this to 1, you actually got to move them both. And if you just drag directly up, they're still linked together. See, if you unlink them, then they're separate. By default, the audio and the video are linked together. And usually the only reason we unlink it is if it's something that you don't need audio for. It's if it's a filler clip or something like that, I'll unlink it and delete the audio sometimes. Okay, so if you put the playhead, it snaps to objects. So if I drag this, you can see how it kind of snaps to the end of that. But if I want to overlap, the next thing it'll snap to is the playhead. So let's say I dragged in an effect. So now
another question. Okay, how does he put this? If you drag something around, it wouldn't cut anything off until you let up on your mouse and left it there, right?
Yeah, like so.
Yeah.
But as soon as you drop it in, you cut it off.
But it's not cut off because you undid it. You didn't drag it off. So if you drag that video over and then dragged it off, there'd be a piece of that video missing now. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, it cuts it off.
Sure enough. Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So you got to be careful. That's why the general policy should, as a rule, I just don't line up tracks end to end, because then you have no flexibility in terms of overlap or fades or anything like that, and then you just end up moving them later. And the busier your timeline gets, the easier it is to mess things up. I mean, if you do this, okay, here's the other thing about the timeline. If I go like this and like this, it's still there. So I can drag the end of any timeline and drag it out. It's just you would have to find the point. Your output. You have to find where you want to go to.
There. I don't understand now. Did it just make you talk faster?
What? No. Look. Here's the piece that we dragged in based on the in and out points. It's still referenced in the whole 7-minute video, though, or however long it is. I can drag it out. You can adjust the length of these. You don't have to do in and out points here. You can drag the whole piece in.
Oh, so you drag is just adding.
You're not stretching it. You're just making more of it visible. All you did when you do in and out points is you're hiding this part of that part.
That just moves your out point or your in point depending on which you drag.
Yeah. So if you get to a point, so you don't always have to go back here. The best workflow is to go through and drag clips in from here, because it's real quick playback. You can quickly set in and out points. But there'll be times when you're editing and you'll say, well, I want to cut off that word. See, maybe I want to cut it off a little sooner. And you just cut it off a little bit. You can also go in and use the razor right here, which the shortcut for is C. C and V are going to be your most common, because V is the arrow, kind of like Photoshop, and C is the razor. And you can use the razor, and I do this all the time, and I'll say, oh, I said, and I'm there. So I'll go boop, boop, and you can oftentimes you can zoom in and see the audio level. In this case, our audio levels are kind of low here, so you're not seeing much, but normally you see your peaks in there. So you might take that out, hit V, so you're back to that tool, delete it, drag this one over so they butt up, and that's usually the only case I'll butt things up, is if it's actual, and then you go. And then you would have just cut a piece out.
Similarities to TurboCAD are kind of uncanny.
Huh?
The similarities to TurboCAD are kind of uncanny.
Well, the similarities to all these programs are not so different. Okay, so now usually that's where we'll use. See, this is what we didn't really do in Expose, because we didn't fully understand this, and we did that in fill clips. The reason we do all these fill clips now is because the bane of video has always been, well, you can't cut out a bad word for us, because if we screw it up, it's hard to cut out because then it looks bad.
It's like a razor in a fill.
But now it's really easy, because you just know you razor out the part you don't want. You make the audio transition sound good. So if I say, and I think, but and you want it to say, and I think this works, you just cut out the but and you line them up just like we would in a podcast, so they sound good. And then if the transition doesn't look good, you just drag, you go back here and you'd say, okay, let's drag an appropriate filler over the top of this, fade it in, etc. But really, that at this point, usually that would be later.
Well, if you had a bad lip in your video, I mean, you could theoretically use a filler for that too. You have to do it right. But
a what?
You have something in your video that just didn't work.
Well, I do that all the time. On the Time FX promo, you had stuff where it was out of focus, so I would throw in a filler over the top. But the audio is still fine. The audio doesn't.
So in that case, you just unlink it and cut out of your video.
No, in that case, I didn't even have to cut. I didn't want to cut anything because I still wanted my dialogue. I was standing there talking. Your camera, you changed focus on your camera.
How'd you do it then? Wouldn't you have to unlink it and cut a piece out of your video?
No, you just put something over the top of it so it fades in. And you can, if I drag this over the top of this, this is now what becomes visible. It's a tiered order. Whatever's on top is what gets seen.
So which one is 1 top or is 8 top?
The highest one is top. In this case, 8 is top.
Okay.
Whatever the 1 is the bottom. So if I said, let's say we had a splooge here. Let's bring this closer. You just go.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you drag one over the top of the other, and lo and behold, you'd have a fill. And then you'd say, okay, how long do I want it? Do we want to fade it in or not? This is generally the kind of refinement you'd be doing though once you have the basic structure down. You're usually not going to be refining that much. You want to build a workflow. Good workflows are always like, I do this and then I do this. So you start by going through all the content that's relevant to that chapter or that video. You drag it into your timeline. If you want to, you make a backup of that timeline, etc. In fact, let's get rid of this backup because we don't really need that at the moment. Okay, so, and let's undo those trims that we did, like so. Now, in this case, we wanted to do a fade. So that brings us to the effects panel, which is over here.
I've done these before.
Yeah. Okay, so this is all, I mean, I have my favorite presets. The one we use the most is, the two I use the most are Basic Boost, which is what it sounds like. So let's go here, and I'll use this all the time. I'll just drag it. If the video looks good, I might drag a Basic Boost, and I'll use different presets, but you know the concept of presets. And then, so if I drag this on here, even if I need to do more extensive things, I'll usually drag a basic preset on, because it's the quickest way to get to it, and I'll come to that in just a second. So but right now I want to do a cross dissolve between these two. So that's in my favorites.
Yep.
I'm going to drag a cross dissolve. What I'm going to do is set the playhead at the beginning of the cross dissolve, drag this to here, because that's the easiest way to get a match, and there's the cross dissolve. Now that worked good there. Sometimes we get into issues where the audio goes right to the tail end, which is why sometimes we don't use a cross dissolve, or we'll make them shorter. Now you've done this before. I think you can grab a cross dissolve and shorten it, and then you could use the same principle and make a super tiny little cross dissolve if you wanted to, like so. Okay? Careful with that razor tool. You don't want to accidentally cut. Generally, you want to be on this one here, which is the V key. Okay. So now let's say we add an effect. So here's this one. Let's go to our presets, and let's start with something like basic boost. Now this is something I would do once all the general stuff. So we drag everything in, then you do a basic cut together. I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this. Let's put this stuff out of the way for now. And you basically build the trailer, or whatever it is you're doing. You basically build the whole thing, and you move everything into place, line up your clips roughly, and you build the whole thing without audio, without effects, without correction of noise, anything like that. You just build all your clips. Then you come back and say, all right, let's start thinking about where we want to put music, and then let's start adding effects. Realistically, the effects can be like the very last thing. So really, you build your timeline. You start your bass music, like you find a good music, and you'd. In fact, let's do that now. Let's just drag a track in here. Now you can do in and out points on music too, but if I have lots of room to work with, I might just drag it in, and then trim it down this way, so it's nice and tidy. So here,
we're going to be the line in text plugin and do something.
Well, we'll wrap this up soon. Okay. Okay, so we have some music. Obviously too loud. So the way we put in points in music is you command and click to make a point. Command click, and then you can drag any point down to make it.
You can zoom in. It says you can't be precise.
Well, yeah, but okay. If we go up to here and go to volume, see every time we add a point, it's appearing in here. So you can actually go to the point in here and select them here. Select, and change it to -15 and get more precise.
I mean precise as far as you're adding an in and out point.
No, these aren't in and out points. These are fate. These are.
I
forget the word. These are up and downs in volume.
That makes sense. Okay.
But this principle of these points, these keyframes, applies to anything. So, for example, by default on a video clip, the line represents opacity. You could add one of those to opacity, put 3 of those in, drag the middle one down, and it will be lower in opacity. Anything you set as a parameter. So if you click this little dot right here, opacity, motion, time remapping. So you could go here, and the way we time remap a track, oftentimes, you could time remap just a segment like this.
I don't understand. How does time remapping work? Is it changing the length?
Yeah, time remapping is slowing down or speeding up. Okay, so time remapping speed. You click that. So now this line represents time remapping. So if you just click the line and drag up and down, you change the whole clip, which obviously makes the clip shorter or longer because you're remapping how quickly it plays back.
Makes you talk way faster, or move way faster. Didn't change your audio.
It didn't change the audio.
But it makes you move that. So
time remapping is usually what you use for slow motion or something. That's what we use for slow motion scenes. Now you can
go it way faster, right?
Yes. So if we did that and played it back, which it probably will play back really bad.
Yeah.
Like so.
I can do that. Oh yeah.
Okay. So
conversely, the audio that plays is the closest one to the button.
Well, it just works in reverse. There's a center line here. So whatever's, the audio works upside down. It's like top, and then hanging from the bottom is audio in the same order. Now, you have so in time remapping, you could put these keyframes in similarly. You could have these different spots and have each one. You could compress time in different ways. But usually, I haven't spent a lot of time with that. But the point is, you can use this concept of keyframes on anything that's available. In this case, on an audio track, they're pretty much your volume level is what you use.
What's bypass?
I'm not sure exactly.
Does it just ignore a piece of the audio?
Probably so. But what we want to do is level. So this is typically what we're going to use because we'll fade down a music, oftentimes to 0. But a lot of times what I'll do when I'm doing dialogue is when the content fades in, so I start talking, let's say right here, I'll fade to 0. Now, instead of this, I'll go up to this tab, which is Effects Controls, expand the Volume tab, and you can skip through the different keyframes using these arrows, like so. So there's my there's my 0 one. I can do like -30, which would then readjust that. It's more precise to specifically enter it up here if you need to be precise. Now it's going to fade down and just be a slight amount of music in the background, like so. And that was too abrupt, but you get the idea. So in that case, we could just drag it out.
Then it would fade. Then it would
fade to whatever it goes to.
Okay, that's when the music fade then.
Now keep in mind when you're editing these, like this track is particularly low audio. So for now, you could crank up the whole volume 6 decibels.
Power workflow 4.
But ultimately, we're going to take this out into sound booth and work the audio over, level it out, and make everything proper so it's even. And then just bear in mind, you're probably going to have to bring that back down later. As we get better with our audio consistency, that'll be less of an issue. Okay, so now we've got music in there. Okay, so let's say we've gone in, we've done our initial drag in, our initial sort.
Yep.
We've trimmed things out and we've made a rough timeline. Then we've picked out a couple music tracks and we've made a rough backing, soundtrack backing. And at that point, we pretty much got the trailer. I mean, that may be 6 hours later. So you pretty much built the trailer at that point. And then the next 3 hours is spent like, okay, do we actually want this clip? Let's shorten this by 10 seconds. Let's refine this. Let's work on our audio. So realistically, the next step right now would probably be to go out and we pretty much know what clips are going to be in here. We go out and work on our audio like we talked about. Now this is like we talked about last week. Rather than edit, go to here, we no longer want to use render and replace because that's just the one clip. That would be just this segment.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so what we want to do
is you got to move all your markers first, don't you?
Yeah, we'd reveal this in project. We'd show it in the source panel. Double check and make sure that our clip markers are clear, which they are because it's grayed out. And then we'd edit the whole original file into Sound Booth, save it out to the desktop if it was needed, and edit it in Levelator or in the Clip Fixer application, whatever we needed to do, save it back in. And at that point, we could then shift command on the new file. So when it's saved back in, we have a new audio file generated that was representative of this.
And we omit reference to it.
And that would be dragged in to replace the existing one that was there. So then, so now you've done all that. You've edited your audio.
Shift command. I think you just clicked and dragged it.
What?
Shift command. I think you just clicked and drag.
No, to replace. We've been over this. Because when you edit, if you take the audio out and edit it, you now have a WAV file. It's completely separate.
I think you just drag the new WAV file over. I didn't realize you push it.
No. Shift Option tells it to match it frame for frame in there. So and then remember, you got to listen to it too and make sure that you did it right and that things are lined up. Because sometimes you'll not press the key correctly. Because if you just drag it in, it's just going to overwrite. Okay. You're just dragging something to the timeline. All right. So at that point, you've got a trailer that's pretty much good to go. As you're going through this, you're refining your clips. Let's trim that down. Let's turn this music up. Let's turn this music down. So by this point, you should have a trailer that looks pretty good. It sounds pretty good, but nothing's been done on the effects. So we'll pretty much always add some kind of grading, they call it, to even good. I mean, this is pretty good. It's a little off, but it's almost always a benefit to add a little contrast. That's what even if something's good, I'll usually add like a basic boost or something like that. So I would go here, basic boost, and put this on here. This is actually a little dark, so we'll think about how we want to do this. But, okay, I just dragged that effect. You see nothing here. Yeah, you see the change, but you see nothing actually happen. Where you look at all that stuff, whatever you've drug from the effects onto the clip, and you can also drag effects onto audio. But they have to be audio effects. You can search for effects, and you can also browse them. So they're separated: audio effects, video effects, transitions. The ones we generally use, I keep in favorites. But if you were to drag cross dissolve onto an audio effect, nothing would happen because that's a video effect. It's meant for video. Although we tend to not do a lot of effects on audio. Generally, if we're doing audio, it's using the keyframes to just do fades.
If we really use an audio, we export it into Sound Booth.
Yeah, the proper term for these is called ducking. I believe you're ducking in and out with your sound. Okay, so we've added this to here. Now, if you click Effects Controls, just like we did with Volume, we have our effects up here. Now note what's going on here. All I'm seeing is volume. Because even though I'm looking at this, it's really, you got all these tracks in here. It's really easy to have the wrong one selected and start editing one. So when I'm editing a visual effect, I always drag the timeline over it so I can see the result of my edits. If you start editing, let's say you change your color, your curve, or something like that, and nothing's happening, chances are you have another effect selected, and you need to figure out what you did, undo it, and select this effect. Now, I couldn't do that anyhow right here because I have an audio effect. But this is the one I want. If I had this one selected, I would change it, and nothing would happen. And then you got to look and see which one you've actually selected. In this case, we want to be on this one. So, by default, there's nothing. By adding Basic Boost, which is a really general purpose preset, I've put this fast color corrector, which is kind of a mix of color correction, levels, and just general stuff. So that's a real practical one. Now you can manually apply fast color corrector by searching for it right here.
Yes.
And dragging it in there. But generally I'll just use a preset. Now,
okay, I know what you mean.
Within that, and it's going to take you some time to get color grading stuff, but basically this wheel is for general color correction, white balance kind of stuff. So usually it's pretty subtle. Like a lot of times, like if it's too blue, let's go to this one for example. This is kind of blue. I might warm it up a little bit toward that.
So basically what you're telling me is when you make Hollywood previews, they either take this and they either do this or this.
Pretty much. But usually when we do it, we want it pretty subtle. And actually, this kind of refinement is the kind of stuff that I'll spend hours on at the end, because then you get it all done. Usually you get it all done, you export it, and you're like, yeah, it looks good, but that seems a little green. That's when you really start color grading.
Yes.
But you got to keep in mind how you're mixing things. So look at this. Let's go back to this one, and let's do a little color correction on it. And this is a little over the top, but let's do that. And then go down here and change the input level so we lighten up the blacks a little bit. That would darken up the blacks. In this case, we'll lighten up the blacks just a touch. We'll lighten up the midtones a touch, like so, which tends to make it flat, so you gotta be careful with that. And then we'll lighten up the highlights to give it a little contrast. Now, just like any other effect in here, you can turn this on and off by clicking the FX. That's what represents that effect. You could also delete it, etc. Now, the other thing you can do is all those keyframes we looked at earlier, you see all these lines. You can actually apply that anywhere in here. So if you click the little stopwatch icon, if you set the playhead, which is same playhead, it's just what you see up here is that individual clip you're working with. If you set the playhead and hit the stopwatch, and then move the playhead here, and drop to your saturation, see how
that particular.
See how it adds another another keyframe? What you did is a fade, a very gradual fade of saturation. See, look at how the number changes, it moves across. You can do that with almost anything throughout the entire program. So so there might, if there's, for example, sometimes, normally we don't need to get that specific because we've already shot the scene pretty well. But there might be a time, let's say, where
I'm just desperately trying to get a hold.
Where the light, we'll just text him. Tell him to wait.
I'll just wait. For almost hours. Hang on.
We'll just text him and tell him you'll get to him in a minute. If you had something where it got darker, for example, like the sun went behind a cloud or something, and you wanted to balance it out, you could do a brightening, like a levels on it, but then do it gradually so that it slowly faded into the lighter scene. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay. So let's say we've done all this color grading, and we say that looks good. Let's go with it. Looks like sunset. Whatever. Now, the other thing you got to remember, and this will save you a ton of time. First of all, if it's something you're using a lot, you can save it as a preset over here. So you could actually go here, select whatever effects you wanted. So let's switch the wrong thing. Let's select this. So you'd select, if you wanted more than one, you could actually command select to highlight different ones. Go up to this little thing up here and save it as a preset, which would then be saved.
It would make a new preset. Okay,
yeah.
Yes.
But you'd have to select whatever effects you want. But more commonly what you'll use is you color graded this, but now watch. If we're playing this, it goes to this and it totally changes, even though it's the same scene. This is where color grading comes in, is things need to be consistent.
Yeah,
so rather than match it up, all you'd have to do is you select it, or the combination of its, whatever effects you've done, Command C, go to this clip, Command V, and it's exactly the same now. Such, It makes sense.
That only works if the clips are exactly the same. If it's the same.
It pastes whatever settings you tell it to paste. It doesn't look at the clip. In this case, the clips are the same. But sometimes
So if that were taking an hour later, pasting that would not have worked.
It wouldn't have. Well, yeah, it wouldn't have. It wouldn't look the same. That doesn't mean it wouldn't
exactly.
work.
Okay, I understand.
Because if it's an hour later, it's not going to look the same no matter what you do. And under usually we're not trying to make it look the same if it's an hour later. But I'll copy and paste. If I do a clip and something's worked. If I clip the colors weird, I'll sometimes paste settings from other things and see if they work. If it doesn't look good, you just undo it or delete it. That's not really a big deal.
I thought there wasn't some kind of magic thing that matched clips.
Okay, so basically you go through all that. It's Tammy, I think.
Yep.
You go through all that. You'd have your audio. So you're just working down the line, refining all this. And at this point, you're getting into pretty serious refinements. Subtle trims, does the audio work? Should this clip be here? At this point, you're usually going to be interacting with me on it anyway because we're going to be talking about subtle color shifts and grading and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, once it was done then, so now this sequence will be done, you Command M to export, and you go into here to whatever your settings were, and you've done this before. This is where you would go through all your settings, take it into Adobe
And you try it again and finally works.
Media Encoder. I haven't had any problems with it lately. We're getting better at it. Make sure you save, and you can also go back to here, and it's a good idea on a big, especially if we were doing like a project where all the photographics was in one project, we would most definitely make copies of this and say this is,
and that's that file you just saved.
This is this project on this date kind of thing, and have variations of it. So usually I'll have backups and things like that. All right, so do you have any questions?
I think I asked him already.
So basically, you start by opening the project, whatever it may be, you drag your content in, you start sorting through. We're recording here, so you guys need to be quiet for a second. You start dragging through, scrubbing through, putting your in out points, dragging those all into the timeline. Then you come in and you start sorting them, getting rid of what you don't need, trimming things up. So now you're working within the timeline. Then you find some music, you start adding a backing soundtrack. Then you fix all your audio in external editors as needed. And then you come in and start refining and adding presets and or color corrections and things like that throughout all the different clips. And then you pretty much come back and give it the final fine-tooth comb, making sure everything looks good. That's the point where you tend to maybe walk away and take a break and let it render, so you can actually go up to here and say, let's watch this in half resolution, which is you really don't need to do full resolution because you're not looking at it that big anyhow. But that's the point where you might want to make it all green and do some testing, and then usually I end up exporting something 3 or 4 times. I mean, generally what I do when I make a trailer, I export it, I upload it, and I'll post it on the website, but then 2 days later I'll say, well, in fact, just today I was working on the Sign Effects trailer and I cleaned it up a little further, and I'll replace that file on Vimeo and do it. But that's the basic overview of Premiere, and there's certainly lots of other stuff you can do with. That's your basic management of clips, timelines, audio, effects, and then mastering it out to audio. Good?
Yeah.